Okay, everybody, let's talk about this. But I'm going to be real with you. I'm side-eyeing this whole situation pretty freaking hard. And this is about Tim Walz showing up at Melissa Hortman's funeral. And yeah, it's got my spidey senses all tingly too. Something about this just doesn't sit right with me on this one. I'm not about to drink the Kool-Aid that the press is trying to pour and serve up as the official story without, as you know, I like to do here, and ask some tough questions. I feel as though that we deserve answers, but I'm not holding my breath since it's been almost a year and we still know absolutely nothing about President Trump's would-be attempted assassin. But be that as it may, let's unpack this mess with a big old dose of skepticism, because there's a lot here that just smells fishy. I mean, how is it possible that Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer can force the clerk to read the entire 940-page long One Big Beautiful Bill on the Senate floor, which is estimated to take around 12 hours, and only further delaying a vote on President Trump's massive piece of legislation before Republicans and Democrats will then each receive 10 hours, 20 hours in total, to debate the One Big Beautiful Bill before everybody starts casting their votes. And during this big vote-a-rama, senators can propose unlimited amendments, with each one of them voted on consecutively. And Chuck Schumer even wrote on X, breaking, "I will object to Republicans moving forward on their big, ugly bill without reading it on the Senate floor. Republicans won't tell Americans what's in the bill, so Democrats are forcing it to be read start to finish on the floor. We will be here all night if that's what it takes to read it." But that's all good, because the votes are already coming in. And evidently Ron Johnson just voted no on Trump's big, beautiful bill. And so now that means that Vice President J.D. Vance will be headed to the Capitol to break the 50-50 tie to advance the big, beautiful bill after Tom Tillis and Rand Paul make 3 Republicans who voted no. Should they be primaried? Or is there more to this beyond Elon's post that says polls show that this bill is political suicide for the Republican Party? Either way, only time will tell. Stay locked in for all the latest, and most importantly, what comes next and how to prepare. The OBBB will reshape our economy and affect our money. So if you're smart, you're going to want to pay very close attention. But back to Tim Walz, returning to the scene of the crime, it seems. And first off, the funeral itself seemed like it was trying to rival Jeff Bezos and Mrs. Mellon's wedding in Venice. With big names, big names were on the guest list, like Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Tim Walz, all in the front pews, mourning as Tim Walz called HORTMAN the most consequential speaker in Minnesota history. Sounds noble, right? But hold up. Isn't this the same Tim Walz who's been tied to Vance Belter, the alleged shooter, through some very uncomfortable connections? Posts on X are screaming that Belter was a Tim Walz appointee to the governor's workforce development board from 2019 to 2023. And that's not just a random acquaintance. That's a guy that Tim Walz handpicked for a state role. And now Belter's accused of gunning down HORTMAN, her husband Mark, and even killing their dog Gilbert in what he himself even said was a politically motivated assassination. I'm sorry, but that's the kind of coincidence that makes you kind of go, yeah, right. Guilty, set up, motive, cash. Where's the FBI? Pam Bondi, check his phone records. And then there's this wild claim floating around that Belter wrote a letter to the FBI saying that Tim Walz told him to take out Senator Amy Klobuchar so that Tim Walz could snag her Senate seat. Granted, that sounds far more plausible compared to his roommate who delivers pizza for Papa John's or something like that. I don't freaking know. And why did this grown-ass married man have a freaking roommate to begin with? But anyway, seeing as how none of this story makes any sense, I'll just carry on. But Now, look, I'm not saying I buy that letter at face value. Could be a desperate guy spinning a tale to save his skin or deflect blame. Why the investigators are refusing to read it? Well, that's strange. But the fact that this narrative is even out there, it's not nothing, right? It's the kind of smoke that makes you wonder if there's fire. Why is this guy who's already linked to Tim Walz dropping the governor's name in something this unhinged? And better yet, why isn't the mainstream media digging into this harder? You've got CNN out there doing deep dives into nothing burgers and producing fake attempts at passing off journalism with fabricated Iran nuke stories, but this gets no attention and swept under Caitlin Collins' rug. Instead, we've got Tim Walz up there at the funeral delivering a tear-jerking eulogy like he's auditioning for a freaking Hallmark movie. And honestly, I'm not feeling this sincerity one bit. And I'm definitely not buying the nothing to see here, folks, vibe either. But let's talk about Belter for a second. This dude allegedly dressed up as a cop, complete with a badge, body armor, and a fake police SUV to pull off these attacks. And get this, he was the director of security patrols at a Minnesota security firm. Convenient, right? Yeah. There are coincidences, and then there are coincidences. This would appear to be the latter. Guys got access to all the gear to play John Lark in a mask-off scene scenario like it was dreamed up after watching a Mission Impossible movie. And he just so happens to go after Democratic lawmakers, including HORTMAN and State Senator John Hoffman, who also got shot up, but he survived. Prosecutors are saying that Belter had a hit list with dozens of Democratic names, including Tim Walz, and not just in Minnesota, but other states too, with Ilhan Omar's name supposedly on the list. That's some next level conspiracy stuff, folks. And yet the official line is, this was just a lone nut with a grudge. Yeah, I'm not so sure I buy that. The guy's wife, Jenny, ready to flee the country, is out here saying the killings were a betrayal of their values. But that just adds more questions. What does she know about his plans? And how does a guy like this, with ties to the governor, go so far off the rails without anyone noticing? Now, the funeral itself racked up 1,900 people watching the live stream, packed pews, caskets draped in blankets, and a priest calling Minnesota ground zero for political violence. It's a very powerful image and a picture to paint, but it also feels like a stage to me. Tim Walz is front and center, calling HORTMAN his closest political ally and praising her legacy. But if he's so broken up about her death, why is there no louder push to clear his name from Belter's accusations or get to the bottom of this investigation happening in his home state? If someone I appointed was out here killing people and claiming I told him to do it, I'd be shouting from the rooftops to set the record straight. Instead, we've got Tim Walz playing the grieving friend and the media is just eating it up. Kind of feels like the homosexual encounters and stories I heard about during the campaign with Tim Walz and some high school boys at an Indigo Girls concert or something like that. But still, where's the scrutiny? Where's the deep dive into his relationship with Belter? And don't get me started on the timing either. HORTMAN and her husband were killed June 10, just 90 minutes after Belter allegedly shot Hoffman and his wife. The largest manhunt in Minnesota history, 36 hours, then nabs Belter, and now he's facing federal murder charges and maybe the death penalty. All of this happens, and yet the motive's still murky and just plain old clear as mud. Prosecutors found notebooks in Belter's fake cop car with names of Democratic figures, but they're not saying why he did it. Politically motivated is all we get. That's it. No manifesto, no clear ideology, just a guy who worked with Tim Walz and decided to go on a freaking killing spree. Yeah, folks, I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that it's just that simple. So here's where I'm at. I don't trust the narrative, and I damn sure don't trust Tim Walz. Attending the funeral, and it just looks like a photo op to me, a way to play the good guy while these ex-posts about his ties to Belter are swirling. And I wouldn't be surprised if an internet detective ends up cracking this whole case wide open with their e-sleuthing. The fact that Belter's accusations aren't being laughed off or thoroughly debunked makes me think that there's something being swept under the rug. Maybe Tim Walz is clean. I doubt it. But if he is, why is he not out here demanding answers about how his appointee ended up as a political assassin? Yeah. And if there's even a slither of truth to Belter's claims, then what the hell's going on in Minnesota with this investigation? Cops and feds are in somebody's pockets or something. Must be, right? I don't know. Maybe you guys feel me on being uneasy about all this. The whole thing stinks of politics and cover-ups, and I'm not ready to just nod along with the tragic loss, let's move on script. But what do you guys think? Am I being too paranoid, or is this as sketchy as it looks? Let me know down in the comments.